Cassie, a young lady, enthusiastically greeted her audience on stage at a club. She sang with a lot of energy and passion, and her band became the center of attention in the club. The audience cheered for them as they finished their song. Cassie introduced herself, but the power on the stage went out after just one performance. Cassie mentioned that the club's owner, Billy, had cut the power. She wanted to perform longer, but she said goodbye to her audience with a smile. After the show, she put on her server uniform because she also worked at the club as a server. She thanked the crowd as they left the club and cheered her for the great music. Cassie's friend and bandmate, Nora, mentioned at a party behind her that they were part of the Marines. Cassie took a deep breath and prepared herself for any trouble that might come her way. She disliked having the Marines at the club and even referred to them as rowdy troublemakers to her friend. Despite her doubts, Cassie was thrilled to suddenly hear a familiar voice at her workplace. It was Frankie, her oldest friend since childhood. She hugged him with excitement and introduced him to her friend Nora, explaining that she used to be his babysitter. He told them that he and his friends were being deployed to Iraq in 2 weeks and had come to the club to relax. Nora teased Cassie about her weakness for military men. Cassie went up to Frankie's group of friends and asked them what they wanted to drink. She told them that the first drink was on the house. All of the friends asked for tequila except for one who asked for a Coke. While Cassie was preparing their drinks, the boys teased the friend who ordered a Coke. Frankie saw his friend Luke looking at Cassie and told him to stop hitting on her. He said that Cassie was like an older sister to him. However, she joked and said that she was into all of them. Cassie served Frankie and his friends drinks. One of the Marines flirted with her and crossed a line, which made Cassie angry and she left. Luke, one of the Marines, apologized for his friend's behavior and tried to talk to her, but Cassie was still upset. She argued with Luke about his friends and the military and eventually walked away to spend time with Nora. They laughed about a Marine who looked very young and had terrible flirting skills, but Cassie had to take a call and asked Nora to cover for her for a few minutes. Cassie checked her phone and then went outside to sit in her old car parked outside a club. She covered some letters on her seat from her landlord who wanted her to pay overdue rent. Cassie then checked her blood pressure with a device and gave herself a remaining dose of insulin for her diabetes. Later, she tried to get more insulin from a pharmacy but her insurance didn't cover it, so she didn't have enough money to pay for it. Cassie's mother gave her some money to help, but it still wasn't enough to afford the insulin she needed. The next day, a truck nearly hit Luke while he was running outside, but he managed to avoid it. He met his friend Jono, who was surprised to hear that Luke had joined the Marines. Jono reminded Luke that he owed him money and threatened him, which made Luke feel uncomfortable. Cassie's mother found out about Cassie's financial situation and suggested that she move back to their old house. Cassie didn't want to do that, and instead went to perform at her club with her band. During the performance, Cassie felt weak and dizzy due to her diabetes, but managed to inject herself with insulin and feel better. She then saw the Marine Corps symbol and remembered that getting married to a Marine could provide her with health insurance. Cassie asked her friend Frankie for help, but Luke was also there and overheard her request. Luke entered the room and announced that his father was a retired military cop, making him familiar with the current situation, which he deemed a common scam. Cassie declined his advice and insisted that they proceed with their plan to get married, as it was the perfect opportunity for her. Luke cautioned her that she would be committing fraud against the government, but Cassie had no issue with that since she believed the government did not care about her or her mother, who had paid taxes but were still treated poorly because they were immigrants. Frankie warned Luke not to argue with her, as it would not end well for him. Cassie asked Frankie if he was in for their plan, but he declined, saying that his girlfriend would not approve. Luke asked about Cassie's parents, and Frankie explained that her mother struggled to make ends meet, and her father had left them a long time ago. The next day, while on a run, Luke stumbled upon his nephew and father in the garage. After his father left, Luke played with his nephew and reunited with his brother. Luke admitted that he owed someone money and his brother asked if it was about Jono again, but Luke said they had no options to pay. Luke's sibling kept asking what would happen if they couldn't pay and if their family would be affected. Luke remained quiet, which hinted that the situation was serious. Luke visited Jono's place to give him some money, so his family would be okay while he was away in the tactical camps. Jono became angry when he found out that Luke gave him only a few $100s when he owed him $15,000. Luke explained that he had a plan, but Jono got even angrier and pulled out a gun, pointing it at Luke to force him to explain the plan and warning him not to make him use the gun. Luke was very worried and came up with a plan to pay Jono back. He knew a girl who needed protection that came with being friends with a Marine. Luke had a contract that would pay him enough to pay Jono back by the next day. He called Cassie and asked her to meet him at a restaurant. He told her about the plan and said that they needed to stick to a fake story. He made up a story about them being together and asked Cassie to go along with it. Cassie was confused and surprised that Luke was asking her to commit a government fraud and was very hesitant about it. At first, Luke refused to tell Cassie why he needed the money, but she convinced him that she had a right to know. He didn't reveal everything about his debt with Jono, but said that he just needed an extra $2,000 each month for a while. Cassie told him that she had a personal rule to never agree to anything without trusting the person enough, and that she wouldn't help him unless she believed him and knew that it was for a good reason. She made a joke about the military, which made Luke angry and he was about to leave, but Cassie apologized and they started to talk again. They made a plan to have reliable times to talk to each other and stay in touch all the time to make it seem natural if someone checked. Luke and Cassie made a plan to file for a divorce when he returned from Iraq so that Cassie could have access to health care coverage for 1 year, and Luke could use the money to pay Jono. Luke asked Cassie to promise not to tell anyone else about their plan, and he left the restaurant, saying that he would message her the next day. They prepared for their wedding, and Luke wore his military uniform while Cassie wore shorts and a shirt. Luke reminded Cassie to dress appropriately to make it look normal. When they arrived at her place, she showed him her broken door handle and went to another room to change. While waiting for her, he saw her guitar and asked if she played it. She said no and that it was just for show, as she had a band to make ends meet. Luke noticed a tattoo on Cassie's exposed skin in the mirror, but quickly looked away, realizing she was half-dressed. As she closed the door, he asked about the tattoo and she told him that it read, "Risk didn't gain anything." It was something her grandmother had said to her mother when they moved to America. Cassie emerged from her room wearing a pretty white dress. After getting ready for their wedding, Luke and Cassie arrived at the venue and found Frankie waiting for them. Cassie was surprised to receive a real diamond ring from Frankie, but couldn't accept it as a gift. Frankie explained that he was saving it for his own girlfriend, but his mother wouldn't let him get married until he turned 21, so he wanted Cassie to hold on to the ring until then. During the wedding ceremony, the officiant asked Luke and Cassie to vow to support each other in sickness and in health, to which they both agreed. They exchanged rings and shared a gentle kiss, which was met with applause from the people around them. Luke and his friends who were also in the Navy were having a party to celebrate a wedding. Having a good time. However, during the party, Luke's friend Armando suggested going to war against Middle Eastern people. This upset Cassie, who thought that Armando's attitude was rude and inappropriate. Cassie and Armando started arguing, and it caused tension among the group. Luke tried to calm everyone down by telling them to stop fighting, but he became angry and left the table. Frankie signaled Cassie to check on Luke and bring him back to the table. Luke was standing outside near a fence when Cassie approached him from behind. He was feeling angry and frustrated with her because she wouldn't stop talking about her ideas, and he thought she was being stubborn. Meanwhile, Cassie was feeling fed up with Luke because he only ever seemed to think about guns and war. As they argued, Luke noticed that their colleagues were watching them, so he asked Cassie to hug him and pretend that they were working through their differences. They embraced each other until they felt it was enough for the others to trust that they were all right with each other. Later that evening, Luke and Cassie went to a hotel with their friends to stay the night. To their surprise, they found that there was only one bed in the room. Upon entering the room and closing the door, Cassie started to tease Luke, saying that he was scared. In response, Luke admitted that he was indeed scared. Cassie sat close to him to comfort him, and then went to change her clothes. As she was changing, Luke called out to her, and she came back to him, intensely kissing him with passion. They both began to undress each other and spent the night together, making love in each other's arms. It was a moment of deep intimacy and passion that brought them closer together and allowed them to forget their earlier argument. find that Luke had been up all night worrying about his deployment. He was getting ready to leave for the military base and asked Cassie to do the same. At the base, they saw families of Marines crying and saying goodbye to their loved ones, unsure if they would ever see them again. Luke told Cassie that they would be under surveillance from that moment on and needed to be careful. He gave her his brother's contact information, Jacob Morrow, in case something happened to him. He asked her to reach out to his brother and tell him about their marriage agreement, but not to let his father know about his deployment. Before leaving, they shared a kiss and Luke got on the bus. His friends lifted Cassie up so they could share one last kiss before he left. Luke prepared for what was to come as a soldier, and their lives started to come back on track after he left. Cassie was able to focus more on her passions of writing and singing after being treated for her diabetes and paying off her rent and debt. Meanwhile, Luke was living his dream of serving his nation and was able to pay off his debt to Jono. They both wrote messages to each other as planned, sharing their likes, dislikes, and a little about their pasts. Cassie revealed that music was her life and helped her cope with a rough childhood. However, she was terrified of singing her feelings to other people. Luke told her about his family's military history and his love for serving his country. He shared a touching story of his father staying up all night by his mother's bedside when she was ill with cancer, and wished for a similar love for them both. During a video call with all of his close friends and a higher military official, Cassie and Luke tried to act like a newlywed couple in love. However, there was some awkwardness between them that caught the senior's attention. She talked about a song that her friends asked her to sing on camera, but she hadn't prepared it yet. However, she promised to sing it for them later and said, "I love you," to each other, though with some hesitation. As the young man went to have lunch with his friends, she got ideas for a new song from her last call with Luke. She wrote the melody with her band and made a song dedicated to soldiers and American heroes. When she called Luke next, he had bruises all over his face and seemed a bit down. He and Frankie mentioned that the day was a disaster, and they nearly lost a man. The men had low morale, and he said they could use something to lift their spirits. She agreed to sing her song to them, as promised, and sang the most beautiful song. As she sang a song dedicated solely to them, the soldiers in the camp were captivated by her music and voice. They applauded her with enthusiasm, showing their appreciation for her performance. Over a call, Luke proudly referred to her as his wife, leaving her feeling flattered and blushing at the compliment. A few days later, she called him and shared the good news that one of her songs had been approved by a higher authority and she had secured a slot at a local singing festival, the Oceanside Alt Fest. She was ecstatic about the opportunity to perform, and Luke was happy to see her succeed at her work. As she took to the stage, her mom watched with pride as she sang with grace and passion, doing what she loved. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Luke was stationed in the deserts, where he and his batchmates were doing patrols and guarding the area. A few days later, Cassie left a message on Luke's phone, informing him that she had been trying to reach him but couldn't get through. She was excited to tell him that her band was starting to gain fame, and she had been performing at her club. Everything seemed to be going well for her, but unfortunately, it wouldn't last. Cassie received a call from a military officer in Germany, who informed her that her husband had been wounded in combat and was undergoing surgery for his legs. She was terrified. She didn't know what to do. Luckily, Luke had given her a note with his brother's number, but after searching her house, she couldn't find it. However, she remembered the name, Jacob Morrow, on the note and found his address on the web. The next day, she arrived at the house, only to discover that it was Luke's father's home, not his brother's. Despite the confusion, she explained the situation to him and asked if she could see Luke. They rushed to the hospital and found Luke lying injured with his family by his side. The father asked why he signed up, and he said he wanted to prove his dad wrong about what he could do. Cassie kissed him and let the family know they were married, so they decided to give them some time alone. He was upset that she did the same thing he told her not to do. He's concerned about their future because his dad is in the military police, so they have to be more careful and pretend for longer. She's wondering what Frankie will think when he finds out about the situation. Luke informed her that she didn't receive the news that Frankie couldn't make it. This news devastated Cassie, and she burst into tears. She left the hospital in denial of the fact that her best friend had passed away. The television commercials announced his passing, and his family expressed their pride in him. The army officials paid their respects by performing his final duties, while Frankie's loved ones mourned their loss. Cassie later visited Haley, who was crying at Frankie's grave. She gave Haley the ring, explaining that Frankie wanted to give it to her after he returned home. Cassie believed that Frankie would have wanted her to keep the ring for herself. She and Haley cried and embraced each other. Meanwhile, Luke paid his final respects to his friend by saluting him. The following day at the hospital, Luke's father asked Cassie if they were living together. They made an excuse, saying that they never had the opportunity because everything had happened so quickly. Jason suggested that they start living together right away, and he offered to visit them regularly to help with Luke's physical therapy and any other needs they might have. At first, they politely declined the father's offer, but they eventually gave in. With the help of Luke's family, they moved into Cassie's apartment, and they were left alone. After everyone left, Cassie became anxious about living with a man for the first time in her life, and she didn't agree to this arrangement. Luke asked her to pretend to be a couple to avoid blowing their cover, which could ruin their lives. She agreed to pretend and do whatever was necessary to preserve the life she had built from nothing. The couple transformed the apartment to make it look like they were already living together comfortably as a couple. They hung pictures and put Luke's clothes in the drawers, anticipating Luke's father's visits. Luke even made a temporary ring for Cassie out of his dog tag to make it look as real as possible. When Luke's father and brother came to visit, they acted like a loving husband and wife. Cassie continued with her music career, while Luke and his father focused on his rehabilitation and helping him walk again. Day by day, Luke improved, and Cassie grew more passionate about her career. However, Jono started to threaten Luke again, this time using Cassie to intimidate him. One day, Cassie saw Luke working out for his leg recovery in an open gym and was surprised at how much better he was doing. Then, she saw Luke's brother running with a golden dog and realized it was for Luke's assistance. The dog, Peaches, was trained to help with his recovery, and Cassie suggested getting her. However, Luke was unhappy and felt like they were treating him like a cripple when they threw the leash on the ground. He eventually agreed to keep the dog with him in the house. Another day, Cassie returned to her apartment with breakfast and noticed that her doorknob was fixed. When she went in, she called out for Luke. When she saw him start walking, she was surprised, but he said it was difficult and painful for him. Later, the couple enjoyed eating tacos together and had a good time talking and laughing about their different opinions. As the days went by, they played games, told jokes, and got to know each other better. She helped him clean up after sweating and treated a wound on his leg. She held him and asked if he wanted to sleep in her bed, and he agreed. That night, they slept together under the same sheets. He gave her a gentle kiss on her forehead, and they both felt themselves falling in love by the way they looked at each other. After a few days, the couple decided to visit Luke's family. Once again, he warned her to be careful around his dad. They spent time with the family, and she felt a little shy when they played her songs on the speaker. Spence, their son, asked his uncle to play with him, and the women watched as their husbands played together. Luke's sister-in-law noticed the way she looked at Luke with. Luke's mother called him on Cassie's landline during her show to tell him that Cassie's home had been broken into. Luke rushed to her place, and Cassie followed. He asked the women to stay outside and went in to check things out. While inside, he received a call from an unknown number, and it was Jono threatening him and reminding him of the fraud he committed. When Cassie got back home, she was weak and almost fell on the couch due to malnutrition from not eating properly for a few days, which caused her blood pressure to drop. He gave her a pack of glucose from her purse to help her feel better. Cassie noticed that his heartbeat was fast, and she kissed him gently before resting in his arms. The next day, he left Cassie sleeping and went to confront Jono. He attacked Jono from behind, and they got into a physical fight. Jono tried to reach for his gun, but Luke warned him never to go near his wife again, or he would kill him next time. As he walked away, leaving Jono injured and covered in blood on the ground, he threw the gun in the garbage. Luke visited his old friend Frankie's grave by taking a bus, and he cried, missing his friend dearly. He shared that he now considers Cassie as his best friend and not just someone he has an arrangement with. When he got back to Cassie's home, he saw that she was packing her bags. When he asked why, she shared that her mother had been threatened by a man covered in blood who wanted to talk to Luke and expose their fake marriage. Luke realized it was Jono. Cassie became extremely upset upon hearing that her mother was in danger because of Jono. Luke then apologized to her and revealed that he had been a substance addict 2 years ago. He explained that he started taking drugs after his mother passed away, and that Jono supplied him with the drugs, ultimately leading to his addiction. Luke admitted to stealing a classic Corvette worth 50 grand from his father's biggest customer, which resulted in his father giving him an ultimatum to pay the customer back or face the consequences. He borrowed money from Jono, which eventually led to him being unable to live peacefully. Cassie found out why her husband, Luke, wanted to marry her. He wanted to pay off his addiction debt, and he told her he had paid it back and Jono, the person he owed money to, was no longer after him. Cassie cried because she realized that Luke's addiction could have hurt her mother, who was the only family she had left. She was angry with Luke and told him to leave and go live with his brother or father. She also said she was going to file for divorce. Cassie asked Luke to pack his things and leave while she was gone, so she wouldn't find him there when she returned. After slamming the door shut, she got ready for her performance and gave it her all on stage. The audience loved it and cheered her on. After they finished, one of the band members announced that they were invited to perform in Hollywood. The whole band was excited and celebrated the news. Meanwhile, Luke put on his shoes and went for a run. He was happy that he was able to run without pain like he used to do months ago. But his happiness was short-lived because he saw a military officer getting out of a vehicle at his doorstep. The military officer told Luke to pack his things and come with him. Luke went upstairs, packed his luggage, and said goodbye to Peaches. Later that night, Cassie's phone rang in the hotel she was staying at. It was Luke's father, who told her that they were being charged with a fake marriage for benefits and that Luke was currently detained by the military police. He asked her if their marriage was all an act, and she replied that not all of it was fake. Luke's father was disappointed in her and thought that she was bringing his son back to him. Cassie was extremely worried about what would happen next. The following day, she went to the court where their case was being heard, and Luke also showed up. The military judge listed several accusations and violations against the couple. To everyone's surprise, after hearing the charges against them, Luke asked for permission to speak. The judge allowed him to do so, and Luke took responsibility for all the charges against both of them. He requested the court to drop the charges against Cassie, saying that she was innocent and he had forced her into marrying him. The court accepted Luke's testimony, and he was found guilty of committing a military crime. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison, after which he would be discharged from the military. Cassie was shocked and didn't understand why Luke had taken responsibility for everything. He was going to lose the job he had always dreamed of. He smiled at her before leaving the courtroom. The next day, Cassie was watching photos and videos of her wedding on her cell phone when Nora called her to the stage. Cassie walked onto the biggest stage of her life, and the crowd cheered for her. Meanwhile, at Luke's home, his father told him to get ready as it was time for him to leave. However, something on display caught Luke's attention. It was a Purple Heart, which is an honor given to soldiers who were injured while fighting for their country. Luke thought he wouldn't receive this honor after being charged. Luke's father then drove him to the camp where he was about to be punished for his crimes. Before starting to sing at the concert, Cassie closed her eyes and realized something. Cassie sang a heartfelt song for her beloved, without any prior preparation. She poured her emotions into the song, something she was scared of doing before. The musicians played the piano in the background as she sang about how she fell in love with him, how she enjoyed their conversations, and how he held her in his arms until she fell asleep. After finishing the performance, she thanked her audience, changed her clothes, and rushed to her car. She drove quickly to the camp where Luke was being held. Luke said goodbye to his family, and before leaving, he hugged his father. He felt sad to leave his family but was happy to hear his father say that he was proud of him. Luke also asked his brother to take good care of his pet, Peaches. Just then, an old car arrived, and Cassie, Luke's wife, got out of the car. She told him that they had kept all the promises they made to each other during their marriage. He wanted to explain to her that there was no point in continuing their marriage when he was going to be taken away for 6 months. But she stopped him and reminded him that they had been there for each other during difficult times, and that she was willing to wait for him. Cassie believed in their marriage and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. They kissed and he gave her his ring, asking her to take care of it until he returns. Cassie put his ring on her finger along with the one he gave her earlier made out of his dog tag. His family smiled and was happy for them. With the ring on her finger, Cassie watched him leave in his van, knowing that this time their love was real. If you like the video then please subscribe and like butter halves. See you next time.